welcome everyone to our event today about behind the scenes COP negotiations. My name is Leonie and I will lead you through this webinar today as a moderator. I'm part of ClimaTalk. That's this organization that you can now see on the screen. ClimaTalk is an initiative by students and other young people, and we seek to demystify climate policy, but also amplify young people's voices in the fight against the climate crisis. So this is us. We are an international and also diverse team from around 40 young volunteers from all around Europe, and I think even internationally. What we mainly do is we write short and accessible articles about climate policies. Here you can see some examples from our website. We have articles about the Paris Agreement, Kyoto emissions trading, the IPCC, etc. And what we try to do is explain all the things related to COP and COP26 in particular, which is also related to this event today. There's still someone who has not muted him or herself. If you could do that, that would be great, because I hear some things on in the background. I think that's Gabriel, Stephanie, not sure. Thank you. Otherwise, maybe Emma, you can mute. Yeah. And other things that we try to do is that we try to showcase young climate project initiatives. Okay. Please, can you mute yourself? I think it's Stephanie. Okay, I will just go on. I hope it doesn't disturb too much. Anyways, next slide, please. Now it's better. Yeah, and maybe something else that's interesting for you is that we have created a full map of environmentally focused university courses around the world, which we are continuously expanding, as you can see here. So if you're about to start a career in sustainability or environmental science, that might be a good chance to find out where you can study such things. And also, if you're currently, for example, a student that would like to publish an article talking about different uni courses that you're taking, you can also do that with us. Yeah, here is where you can reach us. So basically everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. And now we also have a new YouTube ClimaTalk channel where you can find the first webinar of our webinar series about COP, so you can check that out. Maybe Amy, you can post the link to the first webinar into the chat. That would be nice. All right, now you know a little bit about us, but we would also like to know a bit about who is in the room. Who are you? So this is why we have prepared a little Menti, some sort of icebreaker. Emma, maybe you can put that on, and in the meantime, grab your phone or go to your internet browser and go to menti.com. There you will find a page where you can enter a code. And as you can see here on the screen, so go to menti.com and then please put in the code, which you can see up there. So it's 35072368. Haha, and the first question is, where are you from? And I can see people joining from Germany, from Canterbury. Maybe I'll put that in the chat. From Nepal, of course. From Denmark. Oh, a Mexican that is living in Canada. From Brazil. Oh, more people from Germany, from Italy. From Scotland, from Cambridge, from Finland. Welcome. What else do we have? Oh, I think most people are from Germany. So the more people type in the same word, the bigger it gets. So we have a lot of people from Germany, Nepal, and Italy. That's nice to see. And from Peru, you're also joining. Welcome. Oh, and Bangladesh. I don't want to forget about that, of course. Great. Perfect. You can still answer that question, but maybe we can already go to the second one because we have also a second question prepared for you. So stay in the Menti because a new question will pop up right now. So second question to us, to you today is, how experienced are you with COP? So are you a total newbie? Do you have a fair bit of knowledge already? Are you involved but you haven't attended yet? Or maybe you have attended COP. And probably we also have some people who have been a part of a delegation. Yes, of course, Valeria, just go to menti.com and type in the link that you can see on the top of the screen. So 35072368. Welcome. And I see we have quite some newbies here, but also people with a fair bit of knowledge and people already involved in COP processes. That's nice. And to people who have been part of a COP delegation, welcome. Hopefully there will be also something new for you today here.
I think we've just hardly lost Leonie there to technical problems. So are you back, Leonie? Yep, we're back.
Oh, sorry, you didn't hear me. Okay, I hope I'm back now. I was just commenting on the different experiences that we have in the room with COP. Oops, but also you can see them on the screen. Awesome. If you want to, you can keep on going with answering the questions. But I think regarding the time, we should get going. So I'm there. Okay, I'm there. So what are we talking today about? So the topic of our talk is behind the scenes COP negotiations. So international climate negotiations often take place in predefined spaces and sometimes also behind closed doors. So in this event, we want to find out more about what forms of negotiations are there, where do they take place, who's involved, who has access to the negotiations, and all of these questions we want to have answered by our panelists that we have invited today. And I will shortly present them to you and then hand over to them because they have prepared presentations for you and about their experiences with COP. So first of all, as our youth representative, we have here Shreya. She's from Nepal, and she's a campaign coordinator of Mockup 26. And over the last 5 years, Shreya has been actively involved in spreading awareness, advocating policies, and taking action for the climate. Currently, as I said, she works as a campaign coordinator of Mockup 26, and she has received the Youth Climate Scholarship in 2019, while she was also a delegate to COP25, where she delivered a closing state on behalf of YOUNGO and organized several high-level events. Shreya was also recognized as one of the 25 under 25 youth champions of the International Youth Day 2020. And presently, Shreya is a youth climate change champion of UNICEF South Asia and an international spokesperson for Save the Children in South Asia. So welcome, Shreya. We are delighted to have you here.
Thank you so much.
I will shortly present the second speaker, and then I will hand over to Shreya to do her presentation. So we also have Xena Wartmann here from the Global Support Program. She's from Germany, but she's also an international expert in the fields of emission monitoring, reporting, and verification, also known as MRV, and transparency. And she has around 19 years of experiences in international work in this area. She holds a diploma in industrial engineering from the Technical University of Karlsruhe, and currently She supports developing countries in establishing and enhancing their MRV and transparency systems, and in developing and updating their NDCs, so their nationally determined contributions. And furthermore, she supports countries in preparing and attending for COPs, for example, Afghanistan. Welcome as well, Xena. We're very delighted to have you here today. Oh.
Thanks, Leonie. Just to clarify, I'm not with GSP, but no worries. I'm an independent consultant.
In the presentations, please feel free to post them into the chat, and my colleague Amy will pass them to me. And after the presentations, we will have enough time to hopefully answer all the questions that we have in the Q&A round with our with both speakers that we have here today. So I will hand over now to Shreya, and Emma, maybe you can put on the presentation. Or Shreya, you can do that yourself as well. No problem.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Hello, namaste from Nepal. I am Shreya. Thank you, Leonie, for that warm introduction. So I participated in COP25 as an observer, and I will be sharing my experiences of there and also of the Mockup 26. So this is about myself, in which just Leonie talked about. In COP25, like I engaged in several events. Here are some of those. Like in COP25, I spoke about, because I was a part of the Youth for NDC group, and we did a program on the NDC part, and I spoke on program on the NDC capacity building part. I co-hosted a youth briefing with Patricia Espinosa, the UN Secretary of Climate Change, and we also submitted our publication named Priorities of Young People to the NDCs, to the different high-level persons, including the UN President of the General Assembly. As Leonie just mentioned before, I gave the intervention on behalf of YOUNGO, that is the youth and youth NGOs all over the world, on the closing plenary of COP25. So this is some of my participations in the COP25. I will be sharing my presentation in my experience. So like before beginning about the negotiations and different things, I would like to talk about the basic things, because as we just seen in the Mentimeter also, we have it is always good to have the basic knowledge. So the UNFCCC, which stands for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, it is an international treaty that binds its signatories to limit the global greenhouse gas emissions and to take urgent actions on the unavoidable climate crisis. Presently, 197 countries have ratified the convention, 106 states and 1 European Union. Those countries that have ratified the convention are referred as the parties, and it is one of the Rio Convention that was opened at the Rio Earth Summit. Its sister conventions are UNCBD, United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, and UNCCD, that is the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. So these three are intrinsically linked with each other. So the UNFCCC brings nations together from around the world to discuss and to agree different steps ahead to tackle the global climate change. And there are 3 different countries, like different parties that are separated. The first one is Annex 1, that refers to the developed countries, given their historical responsibility, historical emissions. Those countries that had developed and had high emissions are categorized under the Annex 1 countries. And under the Annex 2 countries, there are countries who commit finance and also develops and shares the technology and resources. And the non-Annex countries or parties are those who are in developing state. So COP, the COP stands as a conference of parties, and it is the supreme decision-making body of the UNFCCC. And here the country delegates, head of the states, negotiators, they meet together and they agree on different things under this convention. And they also there's also the considering of the monitoring and review of the different agreements like Paris Agreement, Kyoto Protocol in the COP. And as well as the negotiations, there is also space for the countries, international organizations, civil society organizations to showcase climate action, to highlight the success stories of their countries, and also to showcase different things specific to them. So like there's not just the negotiations that happens at the COP. So there are different things that are happening at the COP parallelly. The first one is plenaries, that is usually happening with opening and the closing plenaries, and normally there are only one plenary running at a time. It is not overlapped. And another one is side events. There are side events organized by mainly by the observer organizations to showcase different things done by them. And another one is the negotiation. I will talk more about this on my upcoming slides. And another one is actions. This is basically the demonstrations, dramas to pressurize the leaders or to show different things. Another one is exhibitions. There are exhibitions of several things going on. And another one is pavilions. It is mainly the place of the country, like where the country showcase their success stories and the things they are doing back to their home. And so while talking about the COP process, there are different acronyms related to it. I think it will be better to have an idea of these 5 major acronyms. The first one is CMP, that refers as the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol. It means it is the supreme decision-making body to the Kyoto Protocol. And the one is CMA. It is the supreme decision-making body to the Paris Agreement. And SUBSTA, it refers to the subsidiary body for scientific and technological advice, which is mainly responsible for providing the scientific and technological input to the parties and ensure that the progress is being happened at the negotiation. And another one is SPI, which is the subsidiary body for implementation, which mainly supports the supreme decision-making body by reviewing and assessing the progress of the implementation parts. And another one is EPA, which is the ad hoc working group of the Paris Agreement that ensures the works under the Paris Agreement are being carried out smoothly. And so like this is the main part of our talk today, the negotiation. So the negotiation is mainly the discussions between different countries, different parties, like so where we can make a common conclusion. So there may be compromise also, and because there are there are different parties who are engaged in the negotiations. So some parties may be in benefit, or some parties may be in a bit disadvantageous position. So I think this negotiation is the main part of the COP, and negotiations are mainly done by the party countries, like who have ratified the convention process. So the main purpose of the negotiation is to review the implementation of the convention and other instruments adopted under this, for example, Paris Agreement, Kyoto Protocol, and other conventions and other agreements under the convention. So the COP, as I told before also, the COP, CMP and CMA, it adopts the decision to ensure progress in implementing commitments. And so this is the picture of a negotiation team. So you can see the first one, it is seated by the head of the delegates, delegates. And here is the nameplate of the different countries. For example, if I am from Nepal, then if Nepal is a party to the Paris Agreement, there is a nameplate with Nepal, and then the people from the Nepal, they can sit there. And near to them, there may be the lawyers lawyers or technical persons who will support the delegates in negotiating things. And in the last row, there is our observer session. So it depends on the parties to if they want to allow the observers in the room or not. So to talk about who attends the COP mainly, the latest COP, that was of COP25 held in Madrid, it was attended by 27,000 attendees, from which 14,000 were government representatives, mainly the party delegates, and another one is the 10,000 observers who are from the different organizations, young people's groups. So here is a list of the civil society organizations. There are mainly 9 groups. So, and the groups of the YOUNGO is called Youth NGO, that is referred as the YOUNGO, and the research organization is called RINGO. So it is the group of the civil society organizations, observer, and roughly 3,000 medias. And you can there are also politicians attending the COP. So the ministers, head of the states, representatives, like who are the party delegates and who negotiates on behalf of their country. And typically in the delegation structure, like each party or say each country appoints at least one person as the UNFCCC national focal point. So like who communicates the name of the person attending the conference of the parties to the secretariat, and the secretariat after the communication, the secretariat sends a letter of acknowledgement, or the accreditation letter, which is needed to attend COP. And there is no maximum or minimum number of people to attend in the party delegation, but especially in small party countries, there are the smaller number of the delegations, but in like big countries, developed countries, there are especially the large number of people. And also, like, as all of the countries have their own interest and national position in the negotiation, but also if there are countries having sharing the same common interest, then it will be easy for them to be in a group like that represents their stronger voice. So that's why countries also negotiate on behalf of a group. For example, LDCs, which refers to the least developed countries, and SIDS means the small island developing countries. So they negotiate being a group so that their voice is heard and also their opinions are supported by the other countries. And the party delegates are usually the government officials who joins COP, being a representative of the government, but also sometimes there may be the non-government representatives as a party delegate. They are basically those persons who can support the government in the technical parts. And all parties have one head of delegation who will lead the team, and it is like not always the head of the delegation is the national focal point. It may be different persons. And in the high level segments, basically the ministers joins the COP, and in major meetings such as COP21, COP15 of Copenhagen, it will be attended by the head of the states or governments. And because there are several negotiations taking place in different topics at different places, it takes place parallelly, so that it is like parties allocate a person specific. For example, a person is allocated to follow the negotiation on loss and damage, then another person is allocated to follow the negotiation on gender and climate change, so that the things that concerns the party will not be missed, and also they will be remain in the loop. And talking about like who is who in the COP process, this whole process is facilitated by the UNFCCC Secretariat, who not only manages the technical logistic part, but also manages the technical part and also provides the technical expertise to the parties in need. And it also manages the participation of the civil society organizations, observers, and other international organizations too. And the Secretariat, it does not play a role in the negotiation, but it works to ensure the progress in the negotiation is being made. And each COP is run by a COP CMA Bureau, which is made up of 11 elected officials, including the president and other 7 vice presidents, SPI chair, sub-STA chair, and the rapporteur. The rapporteur mainly communicates the findings or the main things from the negotiation, the broader part. And the host country normally nominate a minister as a COP president. Normally it will be environment ministers, forest ministers. This time Alok Sharma, I think, is the energy minister of the UK. And SBI chair and sub-STA chair preside over the meetings at the SBI and sub-STA, and they run the meetings under their interest. And along with this, there are also observer organizations who attend the UNFCCC conferences, and they also play an important role. So this is about the COP, the main COP process, the real COP. And in November, when the whole world was shocked by the COVID pandemic, the COP26 that was to be held was postponed. And so that realizing that gap and realizing that as an amazing opportunity for the young people led an COP all by themselves, named as the Mockup. It's for the youth and by the youth. So the Mockup 26, it is an international youth-led project that mobilized due to the postponement of the COP25, when the whole world was shocked by the COVID-19, and also the whole world was suffered from the climate crisis, disasters, but there was nothing happening. So realizing that gap, that void, young people filled that void with our own conference. So what we saw is we can still, because COVID doesn't stop climate change, rather it made the climate emergency worse, and there were several people affected from it. So that to fill that void, Mockup 26 was done in place of the original COP. And as compared to the original COP, we hosted an inclusive online event to show the young leader, to show the world leaders and the global communities to look like what an ambitious and realistic COP would look like, because there are several expectations from the COP, and every time when the COP is around, for example, now COP 26 is in the air, every people, they feel like, oh, what is happening there? And everyone, there is so much interest, but not major things are happening. So young peoples with this mock-up, they showed that yes, we can still have the ambitious yet realistic COP. So to give the overview of the mock-up, it ran from November 19 to December 1. It ran for 2 weeks, and there were 330 delegates from 140 countries, and among them 63% were female or non-binary, and 70% represent from the global south, because the global south countries, they have the least contribution because of the climate crisis, but they are the one who are impacted most by it. So often in the negotiation process, real negotiation process, the voice of those who are affected most are lost in somewhere. So in mock-up, what we showed is we need to include those people who are being affected. So there were 70% global south participation, and so these things, and our mock-up was divided in 6 major conference themes, that is climate justice, education, health and well-being, green jobs, carbon reduction targets, and biodiversity. And our whole mock-up ran in this major six themes. So here are some of the speakers of our COP. It was addressed by the young youth activist Shreya K.C, youth envoy, president of the COP26, Minister of Italy, to show that, to make them known that yes, young people are leading these conversations and young people are doing their own inclusive COP. So this is some of the social media handles of the mock-up. So this is the thank you note. So this is a picture of a person, like, because in the real COP, what happens is because the negotiations are being postponed again and again, and so like the peoples are waiting until midnight, and then it again postponed to 2 a.m. Then it again postpones to 4 a.m., 6 a.m. So there's not proper rest or something like that. So this is a picture of people like waiting for the closing plenary of the COP25. So like just to show that how the real COP looks like, but our mock COP was not like that. We prepared 18 policies of that. So like due to the limited time, I could not talk about that process, but if there are any queries related to that, I can answer them still in my question and answer session. So yeah, it was my experience from this COP. Thank you so much. If there are any queries, we can answer that in the question and answer session.
Thank you very much, Shreya. I think you provided a great overview about what is COP, how is everything related, how do the negotiations take place, and who participates. Regarding the time, I would say I hand over quickly to Xena and her presentation. So maybe you can, how to say, unshare your screen. So Xena, you'll be able to share yours, and this will be probably a bit of a different perspective again, because Xena, of course, she's working with the topic for many years, and I'm very excited to hear about your experience, Xena.
Thank you, Leonie. Hi, everyone. And also thanks to Shreya for the previous presentation, which was very comprehensive and is very helpful for me to build on, because now I know that you know the basics and we can talk about more details. So a few words about me. I'm an independent consultant, having worked in the area of climate change for nearly 20 years now. I attended my first COP as an observer in 2001. That was in The Hague. And I'm going to present to you today, keeping in mind my thoughts at that first COP, because what really confused me was that it was so slow and everything took so long and nobody could agree. And I thought, it's so clear what we need. We need to make progress for humanity, for our planet. It's just a technical question. How complex can it be to find an agreement and to go forward? But that's not really what the negotiations are really about. And this is the perspective I would like to share a little bit. Apart from that, I'll also give you an overview on what my contributions to COPs is. So I wear quite a number of hats in my daily life. As Leonie already said, I'm an expert on transparency, helping developing countries set up their transparency system and enhance the systems they already have. But I also work with the UNFCCC Secretariat a lot. I'm an accredited reviewer for national greenhouse gas inventories, so the reports on developed countries' greenhouse gas emissions, also for developed countries' reports called biannual update reports, for example. And I also work on the side of the UNFCCC Secretariat sometimes as a review coordinator, so the person who basically manages the review experts reviewing greenhouse gas inventories or other types of reports. What I also do sometimes is supporting developing countries with their preparation of COPs and with their attendance of COPs. For example, I have supported Lebanon, Kyrgyzstan, and most recently Afghanistan, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that as well. Before we go into these examples, let's see a little bit why the negotiations are the way they are. So Shreya already said we have different types of bodies under the UNFCCC. On one hand, we have what is called the supreme governing bodies. So for example, the Conference of Parties. So that's the gathering of the members to the UNFCCC. We also have the CMP, that's the Conference of the Parties to the Kyoto Protocol. So that is a subset of the COP, you could say. And finally, we have the CMA, which is the Conference of the Parties serving as the meetings of the parties to the Paris Agreement. So that is yet again a subset of the COP, at present mostly very similar to it. So these are high-level bodies, and any discussions that take place under these high-level bodies are in a big plenary, basically with everyone. And you can imagine that with a very official event and with a large number of participants in the room, it's not that easy to discuss something in detail. So for this reason, we have so-called permanent subsidiary bodies to discuss the more technical issues. We have the subsidiary body for scientific and technological advice, the SABSTA, that Shreya already mentioned. And this is the body that I mostly follow. So the discussions there are more technical, for example, what data should be reported and in what format it should be reported. There's also the SBI, the subsidiary body for implementation, and that looks at process issues. So for example, how often should a certain type of meeting take place? How should a certain type of report be reviewed? Now, the supreme governing bodies are supported by a bureau, which is called the COP CMP CMA Bureau, and that is active during the COPs. So that supports the COP itself. Then we have the UNFCCC Secretariat, which supports the whole architecture and is a permanent body located in Bonn, in Germany. Now, just to clarify, different types of issues are discussed at different levels. And I want to show you how the decision-making process works. So as an example, we have a topic that is discussed under the COP. So let's say we are discussing in what format specific type of data should be reported. This is a transparency issue, so I'm talking about the things that I know well. So for example, the COP says, okay, we need to agree how to report specific data, but this is not something to be discussed under the COP. This is something to be discussed under the substar. So the COP will then request the substar to work on this reporting issue. And the substar again says, this is too specific to be discussed at substar level with everyone, with all the negotiators. We need a specific so-called contact group. And a contact group you can just imagine as a subgroup that works on a specific technical issue. And still, all of the countries can go to this group, but they will, of course, send people who are more familiar with the specific issue. Now, these contact groups are sometimes open and sometimes closed for observers. So for people like Shreya, for example, that is for the simple reason, when you discuss something, sometimes you don't want everybody else to know what you have said. You will know from your own life that when you have a conflict with someone and want to resolve it, the best way is not to do it with everybody else around, but to sit down together with the other person and have a quiet chat. And that is basically the same idea here. So whenever an issue becomes contentious, contact groups can be closed. So only members of country negotiations, country delegations can be a part of them. It can become even more complex. So we can go into so-called informals, and that means everybody, it is closed, everybody can say what they want. This is then not an official session, but more of a session where people can explore issue, can talk, as the name says, more informally. We can even go into further subgroups. They are then called informals. So again, just closed, fewer people talking together, maybe in the margins. This is really something that is being used when it's very difficult to reach agreement. To get back to our example of developing reporting formats, and we're really talking about a table here, the format of a table in which greenhouse gas emission values should be reported, for example. So the question is, what should go into the columns? What should go into the rows? What types of different tables do we need here? At that point, it was already crystal clear what values would need to be reported. So what kind of data? The question was really just how to present that data. And at the last COP, it was not possible to reach agreement on this. So the group went into informals, also informal informals, and tried to find agreement, but it was simply not possible. And one very important point here is a lack of knowledge. So you would imagine that country delegations have experts on everything and then they send them to the appropriate groups. This is not necessarily the case. Particularly smaller countries don't have the staff and the resources to really familiarize with everything. Also, in some cases, countries prefer to send a staff member who is good at negotiating, but doesn't really know the topic well. So they are then given a negotiation position. For example, the tables should not be more than 4 tables. They should look like this and that as a minimum. And then that person will go in with that position and try to negotiate towards that position, not knowing maybe that the suggestion that another party makes would be beneficial for them as well, or could be a good compromise. So that's a frequent problem. We also have drafting groups. So sometimes it happens that then the groups break into smaller groups, just saying, okay, we need some decision text on this topic. So for example, a suggestion what this part of the table could look like, and a suggestion what this other part of the table could look like, and these 3 countries go and discuss this, and these 3 countries go and discuss that, and then we come back together and look at the result. So this can be a very practical way of working. Now, if we go further, sorry. Now, assume that within the contact group, it is actually possible to agree. Then the result, the decision text, goes into the subsidiary body. So in this case, goes back to SABSTA. The SABSTA agrees this text, which is then called conclusion in the plenary, and forwards these conclusions to the supreme governing body, let's say in this case, the COP, and the COP then adopts a decision based on these conclusions. Now you see that this can be quite a long process. And the problem that we have is that actually we don't have that much time. So COP usually has a duration of 2 weeks, but the SABSTA only meets in the first week. In the second week, we usually have a high-level segment, so where all the heads of states come, there's many high-level speeches, and everything is consolidated and finally agreed. But the main work of the SABSTA only takes place in the first week. So actually, there is not a lot of time for the work to be done. Maybe to give you another overview of one more thing that complicates things. Shreya said before that parties work in groups to make their voices more easily heard. On this slide, you can see an overview of the various country groups. And you can see that there is a lot of overlap. It is actually a quite confusing picture, and one country can easily be a member of 4 to 5 groups. Now, on one hand, this means their voice can be heard more easily. On the other hand, this means they also might be subject to majority opinions in these groups. So for example, in the G77 and China group, China is of course the largest player and can put quite a lot of pressure on the other members. So that means that actually, if the group speaks for all its members, an opinion of a specific party can be quite distorted. Generally, we need to understand that in the negotiations, the aim is not to come to an agreement at the technical level that is best for everyone. Delegation members as delegation members, as negotiators, speak for their country, and as such, their task is usually to achieve getting as much as possible from everyone else and having the least effort themselves. And this really makes reaching an agreement very, very difficult. Now let's look at the preparation itself. Actually, it's important to say there is not a point in time when COP preparation starts. After the COP is always before the COP, and some negotiation processes can easily take 5 or 6 years in a stepwise manner throughout COPs. So for example, in 2009, there was hope to reach a common climate agreement, something like the Paris Agreement. And that completely failed because the developing countries at that time had not mentally prepared for such an attempt. What was done then was preparing them slowly by introducing a concept of nationally appropriate mitigation actions that developing countries would take, slowly introducing reporting requirements for developing countries. And then in 2015, finally, it was possible to come to an agreement in form of the Paris Agreement. So you can see that this has taken quite a lot of time. Now, in principle, if we want to set a starting point, we start by selecting members of the delegation. And as I said, these are not only technical experts, sometimes they are just experienced negotiators. Of course, we also need high-level representatives, for example, heads of ministries or chancellors. We also need managers, so people who head a delegation, for example. Ideally, there is some expertise on all of the relevant issues. There are different issues discussed at each COP, so it's really important to identify the issues which are important to your country before preparing the delegation. And when I was working with Afghanistan, for example, I presented them with a long list of issues which would be discussed, where I had already prioritized certain topics that could be relevant for them, for example, with regards to agriculture, with regards to support, with regards to transparency, and so on. It's then important to assign responsibility, so it's crystal clear which member of the delegation will follow which topic. Shreya said that the various discussions, the various negotiation streams, they happen in parallel, so it's important to keep in mind who does what and ensure they are not meant to be in two meetings at the same time. Then for each topic, it's important to develop at least a basic negotiation position and a priority. So the negotiator understands if this is not possible, what alternatives are there, what compromise solutions could be possible for me. And you will not go with a negotiation position and keep it throughout the 2 weeks. You will practically have to change your negotiation position, adapt it every day, depending on the discussions that are going on.
Xena, sorry
yes?
to interrupt you. Just to let you know, you have maybe 1 more minute and then we should finish.
Thank you very much. I'm basically done. It's the last slide.
Mm-hmm.
Good. You also need an approach to communication during the COP and reporting back after COP. So with Afghanistan, we developed a document which we put on Google Docs, indicating who followed what, which side events everybody wanted to attend, what kind of reporting everybody should do. We had daily meetings where everybody was reporting back on what happened, and there was also communication with the media and the colleagues in countries during the COP. Logistics seems trite, but really important. So who is in which hotel? Ideally, everybody is in the same place. So you can already have breakfast together and plan your day over breakfast. Days are very long. So it's really a logistical exercise, this COP attendance. And people usually sleep very little during that time. As I said, this was my last slide. Sorry for going over time. I hope I was able to illuminate the topic a little bit, and I'm open for your questions now in the question and answer session.
Nice. Thank you very much, Xena, for your very insightful presentation as well. I'm overwhelmed with all this information that I got, and very happy to have you here. Now the floor is open for questions, and we already have one short technical question for you, Xena. Maybe you can answer that briefly. So what is the process to become an accredited reviewer? Is the question.
Okay, what is that process? So basically your country has to nominate you. There is a so-called roster of experts, and if you Google that, you will find a subpage on the UNFCCC website. When you are on that roster, then you can be invited for an exam. There is quite a lot of studying involved for that exam. Of course, it depends what you're doing, greenhouse gas inventory or biannual update reports or biannual reports. But I feel it gives you a lot of insight and it's definitely worth the while. So the best is probably to check who is your focal point with the UNFCCC. You can Google that as well and find it on the UNFCCC website and then approach them. Their contact details should be on the site as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much for this explanation. And we already have a second question. I'm going to read it out and maybe you decide who wants to answer on this, or maybe you both have an opinion on that. So the question is, can groups of countries take decisions for themselves only, or do all countries have to agree? For instance, the EU agreeing on specific regulations for the EU if other countries disagree to implement these regulations. I don't know if Xena or Shreya would like to take up this question.
Shreya, you want to go first maybe, and I can add?
Yeah, thank you for that. So like whenever the countries are in the group, if their national interests are not reflected in their group's position, then they can take forward their interest individually. Yeah, I just want to say that.
Exactly. And in the end, we have to distinguish between what a group puts forward and what is finally included in a decision. So that's the two different things. With the EU, what we've often seen is that they want to have be a role model and do more than others. And that is, of course, fine. What is difficult is doing less than others.
Thank you very much for answering this question. I hope that clarified. I also have a question because you talked a lot about inclusiveness, and Shreya, I would like to ask you, because you talked about Mockup and that you had a lot of people from the Global South, women, etc., etc. So how do you see the topic of inclusiveness of parties, let's say, at the real COP and the Mockup? So do you see a deficit when you participated yourself at COP?
Yeah, thank you so much for that query, Leonie. Yeah, like there's so much, like we say that all the climate change conferences are all male, all pale, and all still. Like that is somehow true. So like whenever I was in there, like I used to see the team of the delegations, and most of them, they were led by the male, and most of them and all the technical things, and but also the small parts or the not major things, I say. So those were by the females, like not the typical related to the negotiations part, and most of them were led by the male above, like not youth in their delegation team above like 45 years old, about 50 years old. So that was not inclusive at all. But the mock COP we did, that was I think that's the best example of how inclusive a COP can be. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much, Shreya. Maybe Xena, one more question for you. So as you said, you're an expert in monitoring, reporting, and verification. So I was wondering, what kind of role does this topic and transparency play at the negotiations, or the other way around? What role do the negotiations play for transparency and climate policy?
Okay. So what you could say is that the transparency requirements basically set the minimum of what has to be done, what data has to be collected, how often does it have to be reported, in what format. And all of this data that is reported internationally is, of course, also most relevant at the national level to understand how are our climate policies progressing. Are they working as we thought? are we implementing them according to plan? So this is very important data to have, and the more has to be reported at the international level, the more countries actually do and the more helpful it is for them. So this is really a message that I'm trying to give also the developing countries I work with, that actually they can use this international reporting and the experiences they make as a basis for enhancing their national reporting, because it's just two sides of the same coin. So this means also that in the discussions around transparency, in the negotiations, the more experience countries have, the more openly and the more constructively they actually negotiate. So this is again very much about having the expertise.
Thank you very much, Xena. Maybe to close the session, one sentence from both of you about your expectation from COP26, if it happens this year. One sentence. Maybe Shreya can start.
There are several things. It would be hard for me to conclude in one sentence, but one thing I would like to have from the COP26 is the mandatory inclusion of the climate education. There are several talks happening in the climate education. I just want a clear thing, like, okay, from like all countries, parties agreed to have a mandatory climate change curriculum in all levels of education. Yeah.
Thank you, Shreya. What about you, Xena?
I will retreat to the technical level and say, even if it's not possible to meet, we know by now how to do it. We have made so many experiences in the past year. So I feel we can do it. We just have to really try and set it up and prepare for it early.
Thank you very much for these very encouraging closing words. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening to this webinar today. I really hope you learned a lot. In order to find out more about your impression of what we did today, we would like you to go back to Menti. You can do that now after the webinar and just answer the few questions that we put there. Maybe, Emma, you want to share your screen to show the number of the Menti, or we can post it in the chat. So feel free, exactly, yeah, to answer these questions, what you're taking away from the event. Just go to menti.com and use the code that we have up there. And of course, if you have any more questions, just let us know and we try to answer them or hand them over to the experts that we had here today. I posted the Menti code into the chat, so you can easily enter if you would like to. Otherwise, yeah, I want to thank everyone for participating today. A big thank you also, of course, to our panelists, Xena and Shreya. Thank you very much for presenting today. I learned a lot. Not sure about all of the participants today, but we really hope that you take away from this event today. Now I can see the numbers. Okay, great. I see you liked hearing about the personal experiences. That's great. Okay. Otherwise, yeah, thank you very much for participating, and I really hope you have a nice day or a nice evening wherever you are at the moment. Feel free to reach out to ClimaTalk through any of the channels that I mentioned before. We're on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere. And yeah, we're doing these events monthly from now. So feel free to join also the next events. The next one will be about the IPCC. So also a very interesting topic, and I hope to see many of you there again. Yeah, and if you're on Menti already, then you can also answer the second question, what you would like to learn about in future events related to international climate policy or COP in particular, and we try to take that up on the agenda. Yeah, okay. Shreya and Xena, thank you very much for today. You're you're free to leave if you have other things to do. And of course, also the participants, feel free to go back to work, go back to study, or maybe take a walk outside. Hopefully you're allowed to do that at the moment. And stay safe and healthy, of course.